All right, so we are on with Pastor Keith. Is it Jossell?
Jossell.
Jossell.
Yes.
I want to make sure because I met you the other day. We were at a production of Shawshank Redemption here in Tulsa, a play about life inside of a prison, and that hit home for you. And I know you were there at an invitation of the folks that run that theater group, and you spoke after the show, and you made some telling points. Primarily, though, the reason this hit home for you is because you know Julius Jones personally. You've been working with him for a couple of years, and can you just start by giving our listeners a little bit of background about who you are and how you came to know this guy and why you're involved in this situation?
Sure, and thank you, Russell, for having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk to you and talk to your listeners as well. I actually met Julius when he was 15, 16, 17 years old. I was one of his church school teachers. He was in my classes, and we, even at that time, were having the most provocative type conversations that I really would not expect a 15, 16, 17-year-old to have. We lost touch with each other after he got arrested. At the time, I was one of those folks that didn't realize, like the Oklahoma Innocence Project has projected, that there's some 63,000 to 105,000 Oklahomans that are incarcerated today that are innocent. So I just assumed that once you got arrested, that you were guilty. And I assumed that once you were convicted, that you were guilty. And so, I really turned my back on Julius and started working with other youth to try to make sure they wouldn't end up where he was. It was about 3 years ago, after Viola Davis's The Last Defense documentary came out on Julius's case, that I began to have my eyes open that there's more to the story than what I realized. And so I began to lean in. And as I leaned in, I began to understand more about what I believe is irrefutable, that Julius wasn't there and he did not kill Paul Howell of Edmond, Oklahoma. And so since then, I've been his spiritual advisor. And yes, I do meet with him, and we have great conversations, and he is a great man of faith.
Now, you spoke to him just the other day. That was before this latest development. And for those who are not up to date on this story, apparently, well, last week we know that the Pardon and Parole Board voted 3-1 to commute his sentence. The reason it was a 3-1 vote is because one of the board members felt like there might be a conflict of interest, or there might be the appearance of a conflict of interest, so abstained, but probably would have voted. Probably would have been a 4-1 vote had that person gone ahead and voted. My point being, this week, the Department of Corrections announced execution dates for some Oklahomans, and they included Julius Jones. So he's sitting here waiting, on one hand, for the governor to decide whether or not his sentence is going to be commuted, and on the other hand, he's got a date with an executioner. That's got to be a horrible emotional strain for him, on top of 21 years or so, on death row. Have you spoken with him today or in the last couple of days or since these most recent developments?
He and I have not talked since those developments, but I can tell you from talking to his sister Antoinette that he is doing incredibly well. And the reason why is there was a sense, Russell, that I had on Friday, there was a possibility that we could still get an execution date, even though we're waiting on the governor to commute his sentence, potentially commute his sentence. And so one of the things that he and I talked about in our conversation on that Friday was that we were now entering maybe the most difficult phase of everything that he's gone through in 22 years. Because the Pardon and Parole Board was based on legal proceedings. It was based on getting all of the evidence for the first time in 22 years out in front of an Oklahoma legal proceeding that would consider all of the information and make a ruling. That's never happened in 22 years. That information has not been considered. And so we knew that that could be favorable for us going into the Pardon and Parole Board. We had 3 inmates who confessed or attested to the fact that Christopher Jordan confessed that he killed Paul Howell and that he set and framed Julius up for it. So we had that evidence. We had the evidence that the fact that there was no fingerprints on the gun showing that Julius had the gun. The bandana did not have identifiable markers. And so this information that was being discussed, the alibi witness, he didn't match the witness of the alibi testimony of the sister of Paul Howell. All of this information was coming out during the Pardon and Parole Board hearing. That's the first time all of this collectively had been done. And so we had great confidence that the Pardon and Parole Board would see that and rule the way we thought they would based on the evidence. Now we're going into a campaign, if you will, where there are people in the state of Oklahoma that are not necessarily considering the evidence, but want to continue to pursue killing Julius or keeping him in prison for the rest of his life for something he didn't do. And so he and I had a very frank conversation on that Friday that, look, this is not a victory lap. This is not over. The most difficult work may be in front of us because it's going to be, public opinion is going to be trying to be swayed, and the governor has to listen to all of that. We pray that, knowing that Governor Stitt is a man of faith, we pray that he is going to make this about his faith and not politics. But there's a lot of people that are going to be putting pressure on the governor not to necessarily do the right thing, but to do what they want.
And we're talking here about a commutation of the sentence. We're not talking about overturning the verdict. He is still going to be, even if the governor does sign that commutation, Julius Jones is still a convicted murderer. He's still going to deal with all of the aspects of being a convicted felon in the state of Oklahoma. His rights will be abridged accordingly. And, you know, and even that doesn't seem like victory to me when, if indeed he's an innocent man.
You know, you're right. I mean, 22 years, he's lived on death row longer than he's lived in the free world. Nothing that happens going forward can ever replace that. But that being said, Julius wants his life back because he was not there. He was at home with his family. He had just had his birthday 2 days earlier. They were sitting down having a spaghetti dinner. His sister and his brother had eaten his cookie cake, and he was upset about it. And he was waiting for his mother to come home because somebody was going to get in trouble for eating that cookie cake. And that is the memory they have of that night. He wasn't there. It's corroborated by 3 inmates that don't know Julius, that don't know each other, that never received any kind of benefit for their attestation that they've said about Chris Jordan. And the only 2 people, the primary state witnesses for that convicted Julius, were 2 governmental confidential informants who were going to be going to jail for longer periods of time for crimes that they committed, and those sentences did not happen. So yes, so all of this to be said, he is innocent. That's first and foremost. He is innocent, but you are correct. He still will come out as a convicted felon, and his life is still confined because of this sentence that he has endured over the last 22 years.
Was Julius in trouble as a young man? Was he somebody who the police were familiar with? I'm just curious why they worked so hard to go after this guy based on what sounds like kind of questionable, you know, evidence.
You know, Julius had been arrested a few times. He had gotten in with the bad crowd. wrong crowd. In fact, Russell, one of the pieces of evidence that was never shown at the original trial 22 years ago was a mugshot that was taken of him 2 days before the murder of Paul Howell. In that mugshot, Julius's head was cleanly shaven. The witness, Paul Howell's sister, testified that the murderer had a stocking cap on and had about a half an inch of hair hanging out from underneath the stocking cap. During the trial, when that was brought up, the lead attorney for the DA said, oh, well, he could have cut his hair after the fact. Well, they have a mugshot in their system that shows that he cut his hair before the murder. So he could not be the person that Paul Howell's sister saw.
So this was a carjacking, is that right?
It was a carjacking.
And she was in the car, or she was in the area and saw it?
She was in the car, and 2 of his daughters. It's horrible. It's horrific. And they were literally running for their lives during this senseless and tragic murder. Wow. But he's not the person that she described seeing.
So what's next, Keith? What happens? I mean, is this now we just wait? And you said it now becomes sort of a political thing and a campaign. Who's going to get the governor's ear? Who's going to sway the governor's opinion? Because it's down to this one guy to decide on life or death, which that's part of being governor, but it's got to weigh heavily on anybody.
You know what? It has to weigh heavily on the governor, and my heart sincerely goes out to him. The Court of Appeals had to do what they did because the Attorney General had requested execution dates, and there was nothing that they could consider on the Pardon and Parole Board recommendation as part of their consideration. So they had to come forth and, agree to the execution dates that the Attorney General had requested. So in some respects, the only thing that has changed is timing. If the criminal courts of appeals had not acted, then the governor would have had an indefinite amount of time to be able to weigh in and make a decision on what he thought was best for Oklahoma, for the Howell family, and for Julius Jones. Now that there's a date of November 18th, it is shortened the time cycle for him. And yes, as the governor would, just like Solomon in the Bible, it would make sense that he would want to hear from all sides. And he would want to be able to hear the heart of both families. And he would want to be able to look more closely at the recommendation that his Pardon and Parole Board has made to him. And so our prayer is that truth will prevail, that justice will prevail. And we believe that if truth and justice prevails, then Julius is going to be commuted to life with the possibility of parole. And if that happens, Russell, I believe then we all can come together and start looking at all of the evidence together and saying, how do we make sure that we get justice for the Howell family? Because again, what happened to them is horrible. It should not have happened. This is terrible. But keeping a man in prison or executing a man who did not do it does not provide justice for the Howell family. And what we want is we want justice for the Howell family. We want justice for Julius Jones' family, and we want justice for the state of Oklahoma, because the state of Oklahoma should not be responsible for keeping someone in prison or killing someone that did not do the crime. And we have evidence here in this state, Russell, that we've already had 10 exonerees who were convicted and found to be innocent that were on death row and released. We believe Julius is number 11.
So 2 more questions and I'll let you go because I'm sure you've got plenty to do today. Question number one, have you or any of the representatives of his legal or spiritual team, Julius's, spoken directly to Governor Stitt or to someone in his office? Have you had the chance to make the case since the Pardon and Parole Board voted to commute?
We haven't yet. We're hopeful that that opportunity is going to come. And so we're kind of in a wait mode right now to see what's going to unfold.
The second question is, what is the response or the reaction from the Howell family? Do they remain convinced that Julius was the guy? Or do they think that there has been a miscarriage of justice and they would like to see the real killer, which I don't know what his disposition is. I don't know if he's still alive or dead, or, you know, if this other person what is indeed the killer. Do they want to see him punished for what happened to Mr. Howell? Where are they at?
Yeah, it just listening to what I've seen in the paper and on the news, that they still believe that Julius is the killer. And so they are, you know, and if I believe that Julius was the killer, our family, then I would want to see him continue to stay in prison or to be executed, as I believe that they've kind of asserted that they would like to see proceed. And
Gotcha.
so we have nothing but compassion, because I know I have 3 sons. I would hate the idea of my sons growing up and not having their dad, like Mr. Howell's 2 daughters had to grow up and not have their father. That's horrible. And so we have nothing but compassion. We pray for them, just like we pray for Julius and Julius's family.
All right. Well, Pastor Keith Jossell, thank you very much for your time, for spending a little bit of time to explain some of this. And is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I just, again, I thank you for this opportunity, Russell. I thank you for giving me the chance to be able to talk to your listeners. And, you know, I pray that this will be, I pray that this will be an historical moment in our time in Oklahoma where we're able to come together and do what's right. And do what's right for both families.
Fair enough, sir. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this. I know we kind of arranged it on short notice, and
Sure.
I do appreciate you doing that for me. And like I said, you've got my number, so don't be shy. Give me a call anytime.
Okay.
All
Thank
right,
you very
brother.
much.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.